Ready to start the recording?
Recording in progress.
All right, it's welcome, and I'd like to call to order the Port Orchard City Council work study meeting for April 16th. And we're not taking any actions tonight, but I'll just remind us of our guiding principles of: are we raising the bar? Are we honoring the past but not living in the past? And are we building connections with outside partners? And is the decision-making process positively impacting diversity, equity, and inclusion? So please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
No objects. Our first discussion item, Councilmember Rosa Pepe is actually the one that brought this forward, and he had an emergency with his family that he needed to go deal with this evening, so he's asked that this be punted to next month's work study if no one objects. So if that's the case,
I don't object. You just have to be aware of the deadline to impose.
Correct.
Before July 4th of this year.
yes, if we want to impact the following year. And if this is being moved, that was the only reason the police chief was here this evening. So it's moving that. You can be happily be excused if you like. Have a good evening.
Pencil us in for next month.
Yeah.
So we're not doing the fireworks.
So, all right, we're on, move on to our item B, which is storm drainage rates and capital facilities charges. And Ms. Archer is online and going to lead this discussion. I believe this was discussed at the utility committee meeting a week ago, and now it's before the full council before your adoption here in a future meeting. So, Ms. Archer, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me be here this evening to speak to this issue. So before the council for discussion this evening is an ordinance that takes a few different actions. I want to kind of set the stage for this ordinance by giving you some context, and then I'll turn to the specific amendments that we are proposing in this ordinance. In 2023, the City Council adopted the city's Stormwater and Watersheds Comprehensive Plan, and this was a culmination of many, many years of work through efforts by staff and consultants to develop a comprehensive plan essentially for the stormwater system and the stormwater drainage system for the community. The comprehensive plan looks at the city's existing infrastructure and future infrastructure needs, evaluates whether the existing funding sources meet those needs or whether they should be adjusted, and does sort of a comprehensive look at stormwater in the city of Port Orchard. So the Stormwater and Watersheds Comprehensive Plan was adopted by the council again in 2023. And a component of that plan, as I mentioned, was the evaluation of what funding sources are available for stormwater infrastructure. The FCS group, which is a consulting group in the state of Washington that performs utility rates studies as well as other municipal studies, performed a rate study and looked both at the base rate that we charge for our stormwater utility to customers, as well as whether the city's future needs for stormwater infrastructure necessitated the adoption of what's referred to as a capital facility charge. And we've talked about these in other contexts. But as to stormwater, until this study, the city had not contemplated or had not adopted, rather, a capital facility charge for stormwater. And as a result of this study, the FCS group's recommendation was a capital facility charge in order to meet and maintain the level of service. And the city council, as part of the adoption in 2023, agreed, set the level of service among the various options at kind of the middle, which was not an increase, not a decrease, but kind of just an adjustment, level of service 2. and the council in 2023 adopted the capital facility charge as recommended at the rate recommended by FCS Group in order to meet the future capital needs of the city and its stormwater or storm drainage utilities specifically. So the actual rates, both the amendments to the base rate for the future and the capital facility charge, were adopted by the city council last fall in ordinance number 03823. And that ordinance is included in your packet at page 38, I believe. That ordinance adopted and embedded both modifications to the base rate and the capital facility charge into Port Orchard Municipal Code Chapter 1306. Staff, and it set an effective date. So these new charges were going to go into effect. I believe it was April 1st, 2024. And that time frame was necessary for staff to develop implementation strategies. As part of that effort by staff, some typographical, some substantive issues with the ordinance were identified by staff. And so with all that context in place, what's before you for discussion this evening and was previously before the Utilities Committee is an ordinance that makes the cleanup recommendations that staff has identified. And they are threefold. One, a portion of the ordinance had essentially a typographical error, but you'll hear me say this, there are certain things that are Scribner's errors and there are certain things that we can't call Scribner's errors, meaning they aren't minor. And because this was an error in a title, a header, my recommendation is to correct it through an ordinance. So the first error was the title to the adoption of the CFC section referenced the wrong chapter. It referenced 1304, which is the water sewer utilities chapter, and not 1306, which is the storm drainage utilities chapter. And we try to do our best to catch these errors, and we apologize for this one, and I apologize, I should have caught this one. But so the first remedy that this ordinance does is it clearly identifies that the adopted capital facility charge should be in 1306, not 1304. The second edit that this ordinance proposes is to remove the reference to an inspection fee and procedures for inspection that occur at the time the capital facility charge is paid. And this inspection fee is referenced both in 1306-160 and 1306-150, as was amended by this ordinance that we're talking about. Staff, and if Nick is in the room, Nick can speak to this a bit more. He knows a bit more of the nuance of this, but staff determined that the inspection as referenced in this chapter and associated fee were not necessary because the inspections occur as a component of existing permitting. Thus, there is not an additional inspection that occurs, and charging an associated fee would therefore be duplicative and unnecessary. I'll pause there in case Nick wants to add anything on the inspection fee.
Yeah, I'll just add that when you pay your water or sewer CFC or general facility fee, you pay that connection fee because there is an actual connection, either the installation of the water meter or connecting to a physical sewer. And with stormwater, your house is not being connected to the system. Things are mostly draining on the surface to gutters in the streets and or are being infiltrated on site. So we're doing any stormwater inspection as part of construction, as part of the land disturbing activity permit and the stormwater drainage permit, and it doesn't require an additional inspection.
Thanks, Nick. So then the third and final clarification that this ordinance is proposing is one that's a bit more nuanced than the other two. So I'll try to unpack it as carefully as I can. So the stormwater base rate charge and the CFC, the connection charge, are based on what's referred to as an impervious surface unit, an ISU. And an impervious surface unit is a measurement utilized that is a reflection of the number of square feet of impervious ground cover present at a particular parcel. And because impervious surface is what matters when we're measuring stormwater impacts, stormwater drainage. So your roof, your driveway, the things that will create and will discharge stormwater. We measure the number of ISUs a parcel has in order to determine what their rate is, both for the CFC rate and for the base rate. When staff went to implement the council's direction, and the council's direction from 2023 was to base a CFC on one ISU being one particular rate, on further examination, the definition of how we determined what an ISU was needed some clarification in order to ensure that duplexes and triplexes and single-family homes with ADUs were paying their fair share based on their actual impervious surface charges. Previously, they were paying based on the number of dwelling units that were present, as opposed to their actual ISU count. And so for both the base rate and for the CFC moving forward, we are proposing amendments to the structure of the base rate and to the structure of this, well, not to the structure of the CFC. The CFC has never been implemented, so we're starting fresh with this. But a modification to the base rate so that a single family residential is determined to be one ISU as a matter of policy, which is very typical across public agencies. And an ISU is defined as 3,000 square feet in your city. So a single family residential is one ISU, and then any other use, whether it's a duplex, triplex, multifamily, or a commercial use, will be measured based on its impervious ground cover. And using that 3,000 square foot matrix, they will be assigned an ISU number. Arguably, the majority will be less than 3,000 square feet, so they will be one ISU as well. But again, previously they were being charged an ISU per dwelling unit for duplexes, triplexes, and single-family residential. Multifamily and commercial have always been charged in this manner, this measurement manner. But what we're proposing is we add in duplexes, triplexes, anything more than a single family residential to the measurement model, so we get a very clear, very accurate measurement and very accurate ISU count for these parcels. It is estimated that the base rate may reduce for many of these accounts because, as I mentioned, they were being charged per dwelling unit and based on staff's initial review of impacted parcels. So this may actually help our customers insofar as the base rate will be reduced. And again, as I mentioned, this calculation method is utilized by many jurisdictions in Washington, including Kitsap County and others in your jurisdiction as well. So I'll pause there.
If I remember correctly, it's slightly over 100 accounts that are in that bucket of that we're going to have to go measure. It's not a huge number, but we felt it was the right thing to do to make sure that they were being charged based on their impacts and not the number of dwelling units that are on the site.
Correct. Thank you, Mayor. That brings something else I wanted to mention. Yes, it's less than 100 accounts, and staff has already figured out a way in which we can implement this very quickly so that we ensure that there's implementation occurs if the council adopts this as soon as, I believe it's June 1st. So there's staff assigned to those 100 properties to do the measurements. And then on the permitting side, there will be staff assigned. This will be a component of the permitting process. And Nick can speak to that if there are questions as well. And so, yeah.
Go ahead. You have more to share, Charlie? You have more?
I do not.
You do not?
No.
I was just checking in. I know this is second time for the utility committee to hear this. This is a bit more in depth than what you got at the utility committee, but it's basically cleaning up. There was the intent was clear from last year's action, but when we went to implement, there was conflict in the code. So we're trying to clean the code up and in particular be, I guess, more equitable in that duplex or single family that has an ADU or up to, up to your duplex, your triplex, your fourplex. So we'll actually measure those. And as new permit, everybody will be measured. Questions? Go ahead, Fred.
I have two questions, and they may be technical, but how do we determine 3,000? Is that just a standard everywhere, or is that just?
That was the methodology that our stormwater consultant used
Okay.
in the stormwater comprehensive plan, and I think that was probably an assumption as to the average amount of impervious for a single-family house. Once you measure a driveway, and, most houses are probably 2 stories or at least 1.5 stories, and so I think when you look at the footprint of the house versus the actual square footage of the house, which would be 2 different numbers, the footprint plus a driveway is usually gonna be around 3,000 square feet, unless you're in some of the bigger, newer houses being built in certain parts of the city.
Yeah, like a McMansion on a tiny lot. So we didn't go for the percentage of coverage, obviously.
And it would be a heavy lift if we
If we
tried
did percentage.
to measure every house in the
Yeah.
city, so they tried to
Yeah,
use a simplified approach, because the majority of our structures are single-family
yeah,
homes.
yeah, and
And it's kind of in the middle, as far as looking at other jurisdictions. There are some cities at 2,200, and then Kitsap County is at 4,200.
interesting, okay. And are we measuring it on the ground or by drone, or do you know?
We'll use aerial photography, and I think that in 99% of cases, it's gonna be very clearly under or over 3,000. In maybe 1% of cases, we'll have to see if we have any plans on file and actually get out a more accurate measuring tool and some sleuthing.
I know a jurisdiction that measures commercial sites on a regular basis because they'll call and they'll want to challenge their storm rate, and it's a they use a software program and just you measure right there on site. Yeah, it's pretty accurate. It's pretty good. I have a question.
Sure.
You said there's no connection fee for stormwater, but they
No inspection,
no inspection fee for the connection,
correct?
correct? But they are required to connect secondary to that is in the code that you're not direct discharging
Yeah.
secondary drainage, right? So I mean, they are required if they're not infiltrating, they are required to connect. I'm not saying there should be a connection fee or inspection fee, but the code does state that, correct?
Sure, well, I think it depends on how you design your facilities on site. If you're doing 100% infiltration.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah,
different.
completely different.
And so, but yes, we are inspecting those things as part of the site development activities, I think. And maybe in some cases there is a physical connection if you have really poor soils, but it's not universal, and so it's hard to.
Do it general.
There isn't always a system to connect to, is there?
No, not always.
Yeah,
No,
Yeah.
no,
yeah.
no. Your house could be down here and the roadway's up here.
Or there's areas of the city that have ditches, doesn't have.
Or we use splash box, so it's away from the
Discharging
house.
into a ditch or
Yeah.
something.
That wouldn't be a direct discharge, but correct.
So, I guess I'm trying to clarify what I'm being asked specifically of section 3 here, right? So I just looked it up. I have a single-family dwelling. My storm drainage is $28. Is it every 2 months? Is that how often we're building?
I know, I was saying.
I had to look at that. So, right, so I guess in my mind's eye, right, so I'm a single-family dwelling, Fred is not. Right, so currently you're paying for more than one, no,
In that case, we would measure the property, and if it's one ISU, they're gonna pay the same as a single family rate.
Okay.
If it's 2 ISUs, they'll pay double the.
in today's world though,
Right.
unmeasured, he would pay,
You pay one
multiple
per dwelling on a
ISUs?
rate, and that's how we administered things up to this point, is you
Okay.
pay 2.
because you've got 2 dwellings on his property, he would have to pay 2, so he's paying, I pay 28, he's paying
Not
56.
Not too full.
You currently, yes.
current.
Currently.
Current,
That's
that's
what we
current, I'm trying to get
Old structure.
current structure now, so I understand to what we're moving towards, right? So I understand that correct as it exists today.
And the current structure has no capital facility charges at all. And we're implementing capital facilities charges to build.
That's a new program, yeah, that's, yeah, I'm just talking ratepayers for existing infrastructure,
Yeah.
right? So, right now, we're trying to potentially make it more affordable based off of
Yeah.
your true usage, right? If you're using the storm, you should be using it, so, and that's, okay.
And those cases where there's an ADU.
There's 100 of them.
There's roughly 100, yes.
What is that?
Well, there's 100 duplex ADU triplex accounts in the city.
Ish, yeah,
Yeah.
even if it's ish.
That we're gonna,
What
we'll
is-
take a second look at.
What does that cost for us to figure all that out?
Oh, that,
We've got an intern.
Not, okay, perfect, so I don't have to, we're not gonna encourage a big expense to make this change. Okay.
We've got a really
Looking at
sharp
satellite
intern.
photos.
Okay, perfect.
And, if it's like, let's say 2,000 for one single home, you still have one, one SU.
Yep.
Yeah. Mhm.
Even if you were single family home that was 4,000, you're gonna, we're assuming that the average is 3,000.
Yes.
We're just gonna assess everybody that's a single family home. Now, you've got that 4,000 square foot home and you build an ADU, we're gonna look at you differently.
Yes, correct, yeah.
Because when you come in for your permit, you're just gonna expose yourself on that one. But it's also the same thing as like your sewer bills, you know? You could have a house with 8 people in it, and there's a house with 1 person, everyone's paying the same sewer bill.
Yeah.
Kind of a team game.
Let's change that.
Yeah, my question is not so much about the substance of what we're talking about, which I don't have any issues with, but more about reference to fees in the ordinances. And I wonder if it makes sense to just reference the current rate fee schedule, and it's much easier to update
The
that
schedule
than
and
just
the
scrub
whole-
ordinances.
Good call.
I haven't, I'm not involved in the existing methodology and how we've been doing things and how we're just continuing what we've always done.
But we do have a master fee schedule. right?
That's for permit fees, not for rates or CFCs. So none of the CFCs are in that, and our traffic impact fees and park impact fees and school impact fees are adopted in an appendix to an ordinance, but they are not actually codified, the individual rates are not codified.
Right, but these are.
But these are, yes.
So I'm just wondering if it makes sense to look at a fee schedule and approach it that way, so you're not having a scrub code for different fees.
Yes, there's no legal requirement that the fees be in your code. That's just has been the preference of this city. So we absolutely could look at pulling the fees out of 1304 and 1306 and putting them in a fee resolution instead, if that's the council's will.
I don't know if it's the council's will, but, there's a couple of things that I found don't necessarily need to be in ordinance, and that's processes and fees. Fees ultimately need to be adopted by ordinance, but not in a development code.
That's a good point, because the current ordinance would go through 2028, and then it would need to be revised if updated. Of course, that's the next council. Give them something to do.
Yeah, this one's already written, so let's not create more work.
Good.
Remember that next time.
Yeah.
We want to get this implemented.
I don't have a problem, just an observation.
Any more questions on this? We ready to move on to the next?
Sorry.
Launched out our chair.
Now you have to take it home.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you, guys.
We're gonna move on to the,
Charlie, you go for it.
I don't know,
Okay, clearly we're questioning.
you hanging out, Charlie?
What was that?
You gonna continue to listen to the meeting?
Put that down when you're.
Are you hanging out for the rest of the meeting?
I can hang out if you need me to. Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Diener said he had a question for you. Go to the order.
Okay.
Okay. All right, we're on to item C, which is Mr. Bond. It's the proposed 2024 zoning map.
All right, thank you. The city is, as you all know, is in the middle of its periodic update to the comprehensive plan, and we have to complete that work by December 31st, 2024, and our plan runs through the year 2044. When the city started this process, we completed through the county a buildable lands report. It looked at the capacity of the city's existing zoning, and it's a tool that we use when we write the comprehensive plan to make sure that we have enough land and land that is zoned properly to accommodate the city's growth. Recently, there have been several housing bills passed, and these bills all require us to take a little bit deeper look at our land capacity as it relates to planning for people of all income levels. And so we have to do some data analysis based on the zoning map that is ultimately going to be adopted in the comprehensive plan. Some very minor changes have been proposed to the comprehensive plan. I would say one of them is very minor. One of them is a small area, but is substantive, and it was a recommendation from the Housing Action Plan. And then the other change, it appears substantive, but it kind of isn't substantive, and I'll get into that here as we go through the staff report. So the first change I want to talk about is a piece of land that is at the interchange of Highway 16 and Sedgwick.
Nick, are you gonna share your map?
Yeah, I'm working on that right now.
Page 52.
So the first area that I wanted to share is outlined in red, and it was in the memorandum that was in your packet. And this is at the end of Bravo Terrace. The McDonald's and Dairy Queen are here on Bravo Terrace. Geiger Road comes in from the north. Ives Mill Road is in Kitsap County in our urban growth area, but not within the city to the east of this site. But everything in red here is in the city. And so one of the challenges we have with our comprehensive plan for 2040, our 2024 through 2044 comprehensive plan is that we're just slightly short on employment capacity in the buildable lands report. We were asked to plan for a total of 5,200, we had capacity for 5,243 more jobs, and we needed to plan for 5,400 more jobs. So we're deficient by about 157 jobs. Meanwhile, we had a significant surplus of residential land capacity in the city. And so we started looking around to figure out how are we going to increase our employment capacity just to make sure that these numbers match up and that we are compliant with our employment target. And we got a notice, I think in January, maybe December, from the Department of the Interior notifying the city that Port Madison Enterprises, which is the development arm of the tribe, has purchased this area in red. And this is my first experience with tribal-owned land in a city, but they have applied for recognition as sovereign land, and that would mean that in the future our zoning code has no applicability to these lands once they are federally recognized, and the tribe can develop these any way they choose. The mayor and I have had some discussions with Port Madison, and they have clearly indicated that they only do commercial development, they do not do residential development, and the majority of this property is currently zoned for multifamily residential. And so it is likely that it's going to be developed commercially, and even though it is owned by the tribe and we can't tell them what to do, we can at least show in our plan that this land is zoned for commercial development, which is more consistent with what is likely to happen on that site. And so this is the easiest way that we see for meeting our employment target by converting some residential land to employment land. In this case, it would go to a general commercial designation, and that's what's shown in the proposed zoning map in the staff report. So I'm going to stop there. Yeah.
And I just, in my meeting with them, they are about sales tax generation because they charge the same thing everybody else does, whether it's a gas station or cigarettes or whatever they sell, and they get to keep, what the state gets. They have an agreement that's already been negotiated. The local jurisdiction, we still get our share of that sales tax.
Okay.
Even though the state doesn't, we'll get our share. No different than, the state's share is going tribal entity, we get our share.
Is that a requirement that we submit our share, or they're just saying?
That is what they have negotiated, I believe, with the state of Washington, that it comes to us. It's not anything they've negotiated with us.
What about potential future increases in our sales tax? Will that carry through to us?
I can't answer that question.
And that's a good question, yeah.
Yeah, and we don't have any authority to impose it, or any of our regulations.
Potentially, their rate could be different than our rate in the city. Like if they had a supermarket, it would be different than Fred Meyer.
Yeah, well, there are no
Potentially.
sales tax on groceries.
But the agreement's already been signed.
That's already in place. Yeah.
So
So
are
then,
are they allowed to do any commercial, like
We don't have any-
gambling if they want to?
We
I'll
don't
try
have
to-
any
We don't have
say.
any-
The
we don't
only
have any
thing,
say.
the only thing we have say over is they are in our water utility service area, and so presumably they're going to want water and sewer service from the city. So they have to talk to us about their water and sewer connection, and they are interested in coordinating on transportation improvements because they're going to need access to this site through the city, and it doesn't actually abut develop city roads, but not develop city roads going to this site, so they'll only work with us. And they actually indicated that they get a share of the state's gas tax, which they can use to make improvements that provide access to their site. And so that may be a different angle on funding improvements along Sedgwick than we.
I don't think it's a
previously.
split of it.
Or they
instead,
charge a gas tax.
They charge the same price for the
It might be
gas.
federal gas tax then that they.
It might be for the federal
So-
piece, yeah.
So as a tribal land, they could sell whatever they want to sell and we have no say.
Correct.
Like
It is sovereign, it's their sovereign nation.
Okay.
Casino, fireworks, gas stations,
So,
hot shops.
Fireworks.
so first of all, I thought they had to comply with traffic mitigation. I thought that was
Basically, that's
standard.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Probably for the state highway, they do, because they would be constructing access to a state highway, and so I think they're gonna have to get a permit through WashDOT. And if they make improvements in the city that's outside of their ownership, then they would have to comply with our requirements, but we can't charge impact fees for the development on their land.
And what they're telling me is they want to be good partners, they want to work with us, but they don't. They have to be, but they don't have to.
Do they
The
have,
other thing, the other thing that I heard not too long ago was that they couldn't exercise sovereign rights in a UGA.
Could or could not.
Could not. And so clearly that's bad information, or do we know that for sure?
Well, the UGA isn't in the city, so the only application I got was for the lands in the city. If they submitted an application to bring the UGA into their sovereign nation, that would have gone to Kitsap County. So I can't answer that question.
so on that site that we're looking at, where would they possibly build their access roads coming into?
We've seen that proposal coming off of Bravo Terrace, previously, though there are some wetlands in here, and they would of course have to comply with
That's
probably federal wetland requirements, other than on the property that they don't currently own. And then Geiger from the north, it just dead ends at their property, but this is only a 40-foot wide road, so it's not really wide enough to accommodate a high volume of traffic. Ives Mill, I believe, is platted, I think, at 60 feet, but it's a rural road right now, it's like 12
That's
feet
what I
of
was looking
pothole
at,
pavement.
yeah.
So they're going to have to make some significant improvements to gain access to this site.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing they want to come from Bravo Terrace or Geiger and not from over on Bethel. And who knows whether they could get some additional access off of the off-ramp or some improvement in coordination with WashDOT to provide them with even better access to their site.
I think you'll likely see a gas station, and you'll likely see a box store. That's in their dream world, they attract a large retail.
Looks landlocked to me, that's what I was kind of.
Without them building roads, you're right, they gotta go to Ives Mill,
There's
they've gotta go to
Negotiation there,
to Geiger, or
Bravo Terrace.
Bravo Terrace is the shortest distance, but there's a private property, they've gotta negotiate an easement.
That's not the easiest pulling in and
Yeah.
pulling out right
Yeah.
there.
What's the acreage of that?
56, 57, I think, maybe 50.
I thought it was 52 something.
Oh, there you go.
Is that the only piece they own in the Sedgwick
No,
area?
they also bought
On the other
all
side
of
of
the UGA, they bought that. I think they bought all of this too, or
Not all.
the undeveloped
Okay.
property in this here, which is Scotts.
Aren't they talking about a multi-care,
That's
No,
over
it's the
here.
other side.
that's on the other side?
That's on the other side of the highway.
That's on,
Okay.
that's on
That's over here.
Pons, yeah.
This is Bethel, this is Fred Meyer
Right next to
here.
Lowe's.
So this is Ives Mill. So if they're gonna attract a box store, the box store is not gonna go in without
Better access.
better access.
Freeway access.
Now, how come that's not in red? Have
This
they already
is- this
purchased
is-
that?
Because we're talking,
That's
This is
outside the
county.
city.
Oh,
It's not ours.
gotcha.
This is
Yeah,
the
yeah,
city.
yeah.
This is the UGA.
Got, yes.
I mean, we could.
So, go ahead.
I think the only other thing I might just impart here, and it's not particular to this particular section, with such a large surplus of residential, I'd like to see some additional growth for commercial use as well. I think,
Or industrial?
however, for jobs, right, in some capacity, I should
Yeah.
probably use commercial, for jobs,
That's
when
probably
it
gonna
comes
be
to.
an annexation on Bethel South. That's how
Well,
we're gonna.
There's a few areas, so I think it's likely that we will annex land sooner or later, and that will bring additional commercial land into the city. But McCormick East at Glenwood, where the fire station is, on the backside of McCormick, that, we've zoned that for R2, but there's really no master plan. We don't have really detailed sewer and water plans out there. That's sort of a future planning area that I could see having some sort of commercial node as well. So that's potentially an area where commercial land capacity can be added. There's also room to expand the industrial park, and there's some areas there that they're industrial, but they aren't captured in our buildable land report because they don't have legal access right now. And so if we are able to develop a site that includes the whole dump and provide access to the backside of, is that Ross Creek?
Yeah, we talked about that at the retreat, that we've got a grant pending, and that would create an industrial.
Yeah, EDT, things like that, I gotta keep in mind. With such a surplus, I'd like to see that balanced in some capacity. It doesn't have to be right here or any particular spot.
And we're honestly in a really great spot right now because we annex so much land. We're not having to figure out how to squeeze 5,000 people into existing neighborhoods. We have a lot of raw land right now, but in 10 years when we do our next major overhaul of the comp plan, and once all this development has happened, it's going to be a much more complicated puzzle to figure out how to densify the city, and that'll be a much more challenging comp plan to write, and we should be thinking of those things now. They're not in the plan today. At least sort of have an idea of how we're going to approach that in another 10 years.
So just an FYI, the county hasn't received any application for site-specific amendments or zone changes to that other property.
Were you referring to the county?
Yes.
Yeah, it's an application that goes to the federal government. You're just notified.
Okay.
It's just, when I got it, I reached out to Charlie. Well, what do I do with this? She goes, really nothing.
Nothing.
Reach out to them and ask them what their plans are.
You could do a FOIA on the Department of Interior, it'd probably take 5 years.
So I just want to make sure there's no objections to changing this to the commercial hazards, correct? All right. And the reason I ask is because we're going to turn our consultant loose on doing some data analysis that is going to eat up a bunch of our contract hours, and I don't want to come back to you with a contract amendment saying that the council changed their mind about this rezone, and now we have to rerun all of this analysis. All right, park-oriented development is the next topic for discussion, and this is a recommendation that came out of our housing action plan. And I'm going to zoom in on this little map here around Gibbons Park at the intersection of Tacoma and Shroof. The areas on Kendall and on Sydney over here in pink and in the blue with the crosshatch is already in a mixed-use designation, and it kind of surrounds that park. The recommendation from the Parks Plan was to consider zoning for additional housing development around the park, because the park is a great anchor for quality housing. People want to live by a park, and at least some of the houses around the park are a little tired and are probably ripe for redevelopment. The houses kind of at the northwest corner of the park seem to have a little bit richer architectural value and just seem to be more well taken care of. And so we didn't propose changes at the northwest corner, but we thought we would consider changing from R2 to R3, which increases the number of housing types allowed. It allows townhomes, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, apartments, and but these are all small lots, so this would be more of a traditional walk-up apartment, not like a garden apartment with a huge parking lot. So this is probably the one that requires the most discussion, because it is not something we are obligated to do. It's not helping us meet a growth target. It's something that came out of the Housing Action Plan as a recommendation. And it also recommended some zoning changes at Van Zee, which we in the planning department don't think makes sense, just because Van Zee has so much topography, and there's developments around Van Zee that have private stormwater tracts owned by the HOA. There's small kind of fragmented ownership versus being on a street grid like you have at Gibbons Park. So it made sense to us to try this, and if somebody wants to redevelop, this is maybe the thing that tips the scales in favor of a project being viable versus not being viable because you have to demolish an existing structure.
So currently,
I believe that's neighborhood mixed use, or it's, we have a residential mixed use and a neighborhood mixed use, I forget which one that is.
It's next.
And then
What is that?
Um,
Is that commercial and mixed?
it allow, one of them just allows townhomes and live work units, the other one allows for shopfront homes. The live work units are the ones where you can, you have a commercial space in the same building as the residence, and you go downstairs to your office. And then the,
Attorney, barbershop.
That's the big one.
So that's the peak with the orange.
So it's just all
Yeah.
around here. I don't remember what's in.
and Gibbons Park, I think it's roughly 7 acres, if I remember correctly, the total
Both sides, right? 'Cause the
holding of the city's property. Just for scale, it's, this is probably,
And that's a private street that runs through the park.
it is, yes, that have not been vacated, that is the city right away.
Art Nicholson Lane.
Just runs behind the building. Just runs
Through the middle of the.
6 feet.
Oh, that one there?
Runs behind.
Oh, there's no.
So,
options.
what,
Oh, between the activity center.
which ones are changing on the map?
So everything in orange. Everything
Only
in orange.
orange.
Orange is new. and
Everything in
pink is
orange used to be yellow, and yellow still allows for duplexes and fourplexes, it does not allow for apartments. And so that's really the distinction between R3 and R2.
So I'm sure.
I'm down with it. I think
Yeah,
it makes
I don't
sense
think I have
to
any
say
problems.
Yeah,
Yeah.
The pink
I
is
wouldn't
new
want
too,
more
right?
apartments right in there.
Has there
But I
been
like the
anybody
townhouses.
sniffing around, any developers
Nope,
interested in it to this point?
no, it's just, the housing action plan said, when you're looking for places, it also said around Central Park could be an opportunity for that, but I felt like the View Protection Overlay District is maybe in conflict with redevelopment priorities, so if we're gonna try park-oriented development, this is probably a good spot to start. See how it goes.
Let's say, economically depressed.
Nobody's currently trying to do anything right there.
No.
Okay.
Your house-
It'd be a nice place to do some development.
Yeah, there's at least one code enforcement case in there that's been a problem property where we've had some issues that,
Can we just have one conversation? Sorry.
Would anybody have any objection? Like, I don't, that's all
we're
residential
gonna
in and
notify
around.
these,
Okay,
everyone
okay,
will get-
Okay.
So the 20 or so property owners here will get a postcard in the mail letting them know and telling them, number one, we're gonna take their comments, and then there's also going to be a public hearing. And they can,
Should be happy to see this, I think.
Nick, it's not just the orange, it's like 300 feet from those as well, or is it just the orange one?
just the orange is changing.
Can we give more notice to like neighbors, because sometimes people don't like their neighbor doing
Sure.
things.
I think we'd be required to, wouldn't we? Give more notice of the radius outside of the proposed.
Well, when you're in comprehensive planning, it's not like a rezone, you can opt to give as much or as little notice as you want.
And this is the only park we're doing this at.
Correct, yeah, so it's just,
Do you have plans to look at other parks?
well, we looked at Manzia, it didn't make sense, and like I said, Central Park, I think that's,
Which is Heidi's neighborhood.
the view protection area limits height so much that redeveloping anything is probably not going to be viable because of the height restrictions. It might be possible, but you're also gonna have a whole lot more view concerns, which you definitely would hear from people, I think, because of the view concerns compared to this, which is more of a flat area where there aren't.
Do you anticipate that future comprehensive plans are going to have to overcome that hurdle?
Yes, yes,
Right, I mean,
in 10
it
years,
sounded like it
in
from
10
earlier.
years, when we are out of
Yeah.
land capacity, and we get
10
a number from.
Should
the
we not
SRC and
start that
KSA.
process possibly now so that we give ourselves that latitude so that,
That's,
Those
actually, the
folks
next
who-
agenda item is,
Okay.
that's one of the options in the Biddle housing memo, so let's hold off. on
okay,
that.
sorry, I didn't mean to jump.
And that's a good discussion, because I was trying to tell Heidi that Central Playground is
What?
her neighborhood, right across the street from her.
Yeah, but we're not proposing any
Which-
changes there.
No.
Well, you are.
No, I'm just saying, if we're gonna do this at one park and we're thinking about it, and if we're gonna have
No
these,
one wants to change.
and
it.
hearing,
The
So you're-
criteria that Nick brought forward was that we've got an economically depressed area there that is ripe for this type of activity.
I'm on board with this one, I just wanna say, can we do this? And would it make sense in other park areas, especially when we talk about that one, you said there's height restrictions. Well, eventually, we're gonna have to overcome that, because we're gonna have to grow up. So,
Yes, you're-
why not? But again, we'll get there, so,
And 10
All right.
years.
Klein Park is a very nice park, yes.
they're all very nice parks.
All right, so the next zoning change, not having heard any objection to that park-oriented development proposal, Out in the western part of the city, which includes Stetson Heights and McCormick Woods, over the years, these subdivisions have dedicated a ton of open space that is recorded on the plat as HOA-owned open space, but it's still on our zoning map as residential. Also, the golf course at McCormick Woods is shown as residential, which leads someone to believe that if they bought that, they can redevelop it. And with the golf course, that would certainly be true. On the subdivisions, it's not true because it's part of a plat that was recorded as open space. So we decided that it would be helpful just to show people which parcels are in fact dedicated as open space or are part of the golf course that can't be redeveloped. And so we've added all of this green on the map that really helps highlight how much of the land in that part of the city is dedicated to open space versus dedicated to housing. And there's open space tracts at Stetson Heights. There's going to be more dedicated in the future. There's a few of them in McCormick West. And those areas are also going to be expanded greatly in the future because there's a ton of wetland complexes out here that will be put into open space tracts. And so as those phases get recorded, we can bring those into that Parks and Recreation designation. So really, this isn't changing anything so much as it's showing things as they are. When we did our buildable lands capacity, we did deduct all of the open space tracts, so they're not part of our capacity analysis. But somebody looking at the map may think otherwise because it isn't clear that that land is not available for residential development.
So we're trying to avoid the section A, or what do they call that area? Sort of.
We're just
And I think
from a
it's-
zoning standpoint, showing things actually as they are versus it's misleading when it shows them to be zoned residential when you can't build homes on it.
I think the golf course was zoned, what was it zoned when you changed that?
It was R2.
R2.
So everything out here was yellow except for McCormick Village Park, which is a city park. And so all of the new green has been added. There's also some blue ponds, like at the Ridge, their stormwater pond is now shown as a facility rather than as residential because it's never going to be built on. And this will just help in the future when we analyze how much land is available. Those things will get subtracted out immediately rather than us having to manually make these adjustments.
House clean.
Can I ask, Nick, what's the name of this neighborhood that's in?
That's the Ridge, or the one in Bremerton?
Yeah.
Yeah, Sinclair Bridge, I believe.
No,
Something by the.
it's
Bayview,
Bayview.
Yeah.
How did that not, how is that not part of this town?
It's in Bremerton.
Just blows my mind.
They annexed under the water in the 70s and nobody opposed it.
So this is
Well, and they have well infrastructure on the site
They're gonna use
to
state
the
lane.
west of there. So they have public facilities in that area as well.
So that's where.
It is what it is.
So anyway, not hearing any objections to these, so we're going to, the planning commission's going to see this at their next meeting. Our consultants are going to do the housing income-based analysis that we have to do to show that we actually have planning for all income segments within the city because single-family houses are considered affordable to people that are making 120% of adjusted median income. Attached townhomes, middle housing types are kind of in the 80 to 100% median income range. And then below 80% is all going to be multifamily type housing. And we have to show that we are planning for all segments of the population, not just for single family housing. And I think we'll be in good shape.
So you stated that there is room for Stetson Heights to expand?
Well, Stetson Heights, the ridge here is still not to be recorded.
Stetson.
You mean McCormick East?
No.
So McCormick East is by the fire station here.
Right, I'm saying Stetson Heights, I thought you stated that they had room to add more in that area.
Well, that was potential, that was during the commercial discussion
Okay.
from the previous.
Yeah, I was talking about
Yeah,
McCormick East. So everything, I don't know if you can see my cursor on the screen here, but
Yeah.
everything east of this line and out to Glenwood, I think it's about 80 acres. We're looking at doing a master plan similar to the McCormick Village area that would bring in a mixture of housing and commercial and hopefully add some employment capacity to the city. And given the, that this kind of connects over towards Belfair, there's the possibility of drawing people in from other areas into the city to shop, and this would be the closest location for that type of thing to happen.
Good restaurant would be great.
Maybe when it comes to full council for that, can we put a different color in for an actual existing park today? Just to call that out, is it different than just the open space?
Well, this is Parks and Recreation, so this.
So
this
we're just
zone is
calling,
called
so,
Parks and
okay, we're
Recreation.
just, so we're not gonna
That's
call
all
it any
KFE.
different? Okay, okay. Okay.
Zoning map.
I get it, okay, now I'm following you. I thought we were calling this open space versus, so technically, any of those open spaces, though, then could be developed into a park.
Not a storm pond.
Well, the storm ponds are public
Some of
facilities
them.
on the zoning map.
Some could.
The,
There may be
There-
comments.
I mean, I think that what you're gonna find is that every time you record a final plat where there's an open space tract, each parcel owner has an ownership of that, so you'd have to have 100% agreement to do anything with any one of those parcels, which is probably never going to happen.
Because it's in their backyard or something.
Just never say never.
So you were asking, just a history lesson here that just triggered something. So back when I was on the planning commission 20 plus years ago, the Gorst area and the industrial park was supposed to be our sewer service area. And Frank, you were around back then, and you were on the planning commission with me, and our city council made a decision not to extend the sewer from Port Orchard to Gorst. And that's why Gorst was in the UGA, the industrial park was in the UGA, and if we would have served sewer to it, Gorst and the Bremerton's industrial park would be in the city of Port Orchard, and not the city of Bremerton.
But that's different than the Bayview neighborhood.
Correct.
Yeah.
But yeah. So the city would look much different, and our job capacity would be a lot different. So just be thinking long-term versus, my goodness, we shouldn't, we don't want to pay for that pipe in the ground, and the ramifications of that. Bremerton has jobs and revenue that we should have.
Yep, yep, I mean,
A lot of it.
Imagine what we would have heard back then had we tried that.
All right,
Is that it?
that's all.
That's all.
Next item.
All right, let's go to the next item, the middle housing options implementation for the state of Washington.
All right, so the zoning map discussion is a great segue to the middle housing memorandum that we had to prepare. Just a little background on this issue. The state legislature passed House Bill 1110 in 2023. They did a trailer bill that they adopted just this last February or March that we only just learned about that tweaks some of the requirements concerning middle housing. And after the first bill passed in 2023, the Department of Commerce offered grants for cities to implement the requirements of this bill. Port Orchard applied for a grant, and we were given, I think, $75,000. And our first deliverable is an alternatives memo that looks at our various alternatives for complying with the middle housing bill. For everyone's information, middle housing, it is now defined in the RCW. It includes various building types that are harmonious with single-family houses, but offer multiple units within a single structure, such as duplexes, triplexes, and townhomes. And it plays a crucial role in addressing housing need by providing diverse housing options, promoting affordability, supporting efficient land use, and enhancing walkability and accessibility in neighborhoods. And so the middle housing bill applies primarily to zones that are primarily designated for single-family use. And so in the city of Port Orchard, the city's R1, R2, and R3 zones have primarily been developed as single-family, although R3 has had a lot of apartments, so it's debatable whether R3 gets lumped in there. But I think because single-family homes are allowed in the R3 district, and we've had quite a few single-family homes developed in R3, we're really focused on the R1, R2, and R3 zone. Under the law, which originally required more of Port Orchard, but now only requires that we allow for at least 2 housing units on every residential lot in the zones that are predominantly for single-family use. And there's a few other minor adjustments to our zoning regulations that we have to make, but it doesn't require changes to the zoning map. So Port Orchard adopted its zoning code. We did a pretty major overhaul in 2017, and we adopted a lot of these middle housing types, though we took a different approach than what's now required in state law. So I think that Port Orchard is mostly compliant with the spirit of these new middle housing laws, although the housing laws kind of approach how this is done a little bit differently than how our code is written. And so we put forward a couple of different alternatives for the city to consider. And one of the things we want the council to consider as part of these alternatives is that we're growing really quickly, and the legislature broke the law down into tiers based on population. And if you're under 25,000 people, you have to provide 2 units per lot. That's the end of story. If you're between 25,000 and 75,000 people and you're contiguous to the largest city within your county, which we are contiguous to Bremerton, so it applies to us, you have to provide a higher threshold of middle housing and also ensure that your code allows for all of these middle housing types on all lots that are zoned predominantly for residential, single-family residential use. And so we're looking at this situation as we're growing so fast that we're going to trip this population threshold that it may be worth complying with the higher tier threshold now rather than waiting a few years and then having to do a whole other exercise of writing the code. So alternative 1 would be the simplest alternative, which is just to meet the law based on our today population and provide for 2 units of housing per lot. Alternative 2 is takes that a step further and basically says that let's take all of the R1 zone land in the city and let's actually go ahead and move it to R2, because the R2 is going to provide for all of the middle housing types that would be required when our population hits 25,000 people. And that's going to also add residential capacity to our city so that next time we do a comprehensive plan update, we have still enough residential land capacity in the city without having to make drastic changes. But there is another alternative that we outlined in the memo, and that is to, the law did include sort of an exemption or an out for cities that had already largely complied with the middle housing bill, which I think we could argue that we have. And again, our approaches are very different than what's in the state law, but all of the housing types that the state wants us to allow are allowed in the majority of our residential zones. So we could, rather than going through the process of changing our zoning code and our zoning map, we could just apply to the state and say, look, we've done all this work, we are compliant, and we just have to show our work. And so we're at this point where we have to decide which path do we want to pursue. The deadline for implementing middle housing is June 30th of 2025, so that's actually 6 months after we do our comprehensive plan. And the nice thing about the bill is that it provides you with shelter from any possible appeals, so we can't be appealed for taking action to implement the middle housing bill. So whichever alternative we want to pick, and you don't have to choose today, we're just trying to outline these in a memo for you. We have a little bit more time than just the 2024 comprehensive plan deadline, and but we do need to pick a path probably by July or August, and then start down that path so that we can have something ready to adopt by next probably February or March, and then we have to submit it to the state for approval.
So in sum, you're looking at telling the state that we've met the spirit of the legislation so far, and then we're looking to further that with perhaps alternative 2.
Well, I think that from staff's perspective, we like alternative 2 because it's going to save us work 5 years from now when we have to. The GMA was changed. You used to have to update your comp plan every 8 years. Now it's every 10 years, but you do a 5-year check-in. And if we hit 25,000 before our 5-year check-in, it's not totally clear to me whether this then becomes required at that point or is not required again until 2034. So it could be 5 years, it could be 10 years before we're going to have to do this work. But sooner or later, we're going to have to do the work, and it might be wise just to get in front of it now and save ourselves a long-range project, especially since we have grant money to do this and we have immunity from appeal.
You know, my thought is we've got a crisis going on with housing, up and down. And so I think getting ahead of it with alternative 2 will help with that, albeit maybe not as much as we would like, but we're still in front of it, and future changes that will be coming as well.
I'm kind of thinking go for the zoning, because then it's in your code, it's written down, and then the state or a builder can't come along and say, oh, I want to build a bunch of apartments. So we have a zoning that's only for middle housing. Would that secure it more so?
Well, so the middle housing bill doesn't have anything to do with apartments or not doing apartments. And our R2 zone does not allow apartments.
Okay.
We're only talking about the R1 and the R2 zone. We would basically take all of our R1 and make it R2, which would be our new lowest density zone, but would allow for all of the middle housing types, but not apartments.
I just want to make sure that's really clear.
Too.
But you're talking about, I mean, we're gonna, if we don't go to R2 now, we're just stepping away from it for
A short period.
18
A
months.
few
or
years.
whatever.
Well,
At this pace,
and-
right back into it again.
With the caveat that at the rate that the legislature is passing housing legislation, who
Yeah.
knows whether,
Yeah.
something else is gonna come.
Every
through.
session, yeah, every
Yeah.
session we're getting more.
So
updates.
I included in the memo, we provided the map showing just the areas zoned R1 in the city to help you understand what this alternative looked like. And Brandy, I don't know if you can pull up the second to last page of the packet, it's 85. So you have to zoom out so you can see the whole page here. But everything in yellow, we basically turned off all of the zoning except for R1. And so on the screen here, you
That's
can
where it
see
says.
everything that is in light yellow here would become kind of the darker, more medium yellow and would become R2. So those are the parts of the city that would be affected. And, frankly, there's some of these that don't have a lot of development potential because they either don't have utilities, they have tons of critical areas, and so
Right.
those critical area protections are still going to prevent the total development of the property, but it just opens the door for those lots to be used in a different way that includes middle housing. And you need sewer and water for middle housing, you're not gonna develop those on septic. And so the areas that don't have, the upper left there, there's those eight parcels, and down behind Lowe's, those areas don't have sewer, and it is a long way to bring sewer to those properties. So even though they're zoned for middle
Behind
housing,
Montgomery Meadows, doesn't it? They couldn't connect?
well, you have to go through the rural county with sewer to go back into
I
that
see
part
what
of the
you're
city. There's just no, there's no way, I guess.
There's
you could-
gaps in that?
There's huge ravines where you're having to go across,
Topography
pretty
is crazy.
nasty topography.
Okay.
And then Beeline Road behind Lowe's, you're also, there's no you have to go through rural county right of way south, and then east, and then north to get back to that area. Or you're gonna have to figure out how to get across Blackjack Creek and provide easements, and there's no public easement at this point to do that. So those places, even though they'd be R2, still aren't going to probably see any middle housing. And same with down off of Bay Street, Casco Lane's private road, there's fire requirements, so even if you make most of these R2, I think you're probably not gonna see a whole lot of middle housing development there anyway, but at least it's allowed if somebody wanted to do that.
Nick, what is the practical effect? I mean, it sounds like everything is R2, which I understand, including McCormick, but how likely are lots on McCormick going to redevelop into duplexes?
Well, so that's another portion of the law that I didn't mention, but any covenants that were recorded, I think, before some date in 2003, that prohibit those types of buildings, those covenants are still in effect, but you can't have new covenants that prevent middle
Oh,
housing.
interesting, so the
Yeah.
HOA would
So
say,
those
HOA
each-
can say no.
But the
So you can't
city
do an
has to
ADU.
approve it. So the city would say, yes, we can give you a building permit, but they're gonna be in a civil dispute with the HOA, and it's a question of whether the HOA is going to allow it, or whether the HOA is going to sue to stop it from happening.
interesting. Okay, so practically speaking, though, even if you're talking, it sounds like, and I'm thinking vaguely, it sounds like we have potentially more infill type areas where people are allowed to redevelopment, but I'm just wondering how likely are these lots going to be redeveloped into like multi?
I don't think it's very likely. There's maybe a
Okay.
handful of lots that have water and sewer and don't have major constraints. I mean, the R1, it was really put in areas where you had constraints. There was maybe a portion of a site that was developable, but it's along Blackjack Creek or it's along Sinclair Inlet, and there's just challenges with it. And so we didn't want to, promise that you could do this by zoning, but then not have the infrastructure to support it.
And to answer your question, I can't even build a fence, let alone an apartment for my daughter.
You probably can't paint
Just so you
Yeah,
know.
you can't paint your house any
I
color you
got
want.
permission today to put a patio in my front area, so
You did? Oh, wow.
So there's a zoning map, if you can scroll one page further, Brandy, to 86. this is what the zoning map would look like, under alternative 2 at 20, which we would have to do at 25,000 in population. But basically, although R1 is gone, none of the other zoning changes, other than the 3 that we discussed on the last agenda item, are shown on this proposed map.
So I heard Scott and John are both advocating to just step up, do the work, go to the threshold for 25,000, so we're not repeating this work
Agreed.
2 or 3 years or so.
For Nick to do the work.
For not, for Nick, well, but ultimately.
It's very easy for us to say, yes, let's do this.
Yeah, but we still have to help conduct the public hearings, we have to,
Yes, yeah.
there's staff time and your time involved and public outreach to go with it.
Face the fire now or face it in 2 years.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Surprising me how little would change, actually. Honestly,
Yeah,
if
I'm
I'm
surprised on
giving
that.
my honest feedback.
But remember that the
I'm all
second
for
part
it.
of alternative 2, it's not just that things are being zoned R2, but the zoning code is going to have some subtle changes. Like right now, townhomes in the city, you have to actually subdivide the townhomes so that each unit
Can't
is
be
on
more
its
than
own
two.
lot. Under the new law, it actually allows for townhome units to be multiple units on a lot. You don't go through the subdivision process. So there's some subtle differences in the model code that the Department of Commerce developed that would affect kind of how the R2 zone works. But for the most part, the building types are still allowed. It's just how you get to the finished product is a little bit different.
So Nick, though, the developer could choose to condominiumize
Yes.
that lot, they just aren't required to
Correct.
condominiumize that townhome development.
And that was one of the things
Yeah,
in
well,
2017, we wanted to encourage multifamily home ownership where you could actually own the unit, which is if you subdivide the townhome so that each one is on a lot, it's more likely that it's available for sale than if they don't go through the subdivision process where it's gonna end up as a rental property.
And each is an ISU.
Is, R4, that's apartments?
R4 is 4-story apartments, R3 allows everything from single family to apartments, but it's capped at 3 stories.
Okay.
So R4 is 4 or more, right?
Yeah, and actually there's not much R4 in the city. Behind the mall, and then the Port Madison Enterprises property had some R4, but it's going away. So there really isn't much R4 in the city at this
What
point.
about Ruby Creek?
Ruby Creek is mixed use, so it's
Okay, so
totally
it
different.
could be tall there,
Yeah.
because it's mixed use.
Do we have any 4-story in the city?
I don't recall anything, we got some
The
3.
Clisco Apartments is garages under 3 stories of apartments, so it's
okay.
kind of like, but it's a sloping site where it's actually at the street it's 3, but on the backside it's 4, which is kind of like a daylight
Down in a hole.
garage.
Yeah.
So,
A daylight.
and we,
inside.
the 429 Bay Street project is similar. It's got a parking deck with 3 stories above it. If that breaks ground, and hopefully it will soon.
We're still at odds with Puget Sound Energy. Some utility lines.
I'm curious, for future, unrelated, Nick, the stuff that's white, what it's zoned now, if it's gonna potentially be part, I'm just curious, we got a lot of mixed use and stuff over
Well,
by Ruby Creek, and I'm just curious,
You mean the UGA or what?
yeah,
Oh.
I'm just curious in what it would be, but that's okay.
I'm getting the flashing battery light that my computer's gonna die here, but I'll try to show you.
Oh, it's a sign.
It's a sign to not answer my question tonight. I'm not looking for it tonight. I'm just curious what that would look like, because it seems as though there's definitely a red corridor that makes kind of a backwards L here.
So you can see on, oh, Randy, can you stop your share? I started a new share, but. So the blue dashed line out here is our urban growth boundary. We have very little urban growth area that we can annex going east. There's a few tiny pockets, but most of the area that we can annex is out here, and this is all zoned by the county for urban development, and their densities are changing as part of their comprehensive plan process as well. They have to allow more multifamily housing to meet the requirements for planning at all income levels, for planning for housing for people of all income levels, which I think they've determined that they need to make changes in order to be in compliance with that. So we could annex any of that and gain land capacity, but at the same time, the county the county has a growth target already for that area, so that's gonna shift their target kind of into the city next time we update the countywide planning policies, so we're gonna get additional growth because it's 10 years from now, plus anything we annex, we're gonna get even more of our fair share than what we
That's
currently
weird, that whole little pocket, they're not even available, even though it just completely cuts us off.
Selected.
Nick, how far south does that go?
Down to,
That's
sorry,
crazy.
trying to get the zoom right here.
There's to the west or the east?
There's a zoning layer on
Yeah,
right
this whole section right here, Frank.
So when you turn on the zoning in the county, so the city zoning is just grayed out because the county doesn't have our data.
Yeah,
But there's commercial down here on Bethel, there's some industrial down there, but most of this is urban low. What is that, urban reserve? Is that what the UR is, Scott?
Urban restricted.
Restricted. And then there's, this is the park, the big regional park. And then there's some commercial up on Mile Hill, and then you're out, once you cross the blue dashed line, you're into rural. And so,
Is all that commercial on the east?
that's Manchester.
That's Manchester.
That's not commercial though, right?
Yeah, it's rural, but it's got a special designation. So, what is the, why is that, I'm just curious about Drexel Park, was that?
I drive around all day, and it's-
It's in the city.
it's in the city.
So we're gonna turn it into park space. Okay.
All right, well,
So I think we got direction in there, plan for
Yeah.
25,000 people. I got a couple things for good in order. I got Sophie's summary document yesterday afternoon. We're having our managers meeting, directors meeting tomorrow afternoon. So they can see that document, we can talk through it as a group, and we can work on an implementation plan and, so I can report back to you timelines for those things that you gave us in that now.
For the buckets.
Yeah, in
Did
the
she send it
buckets.
to us and I didn't see
Yeah,
it?
she did not send it. I got it. I'll get it out to you
Okay.
guys. I haven't even opened it myself,
Yeah.
so, but I know I have
That's
it.
special.
So.
Well, I was like, yeah, we didn't get it, that's our document, yeah, okay.
Yeah, there's a whole package of document. I'll get it out to you guys, but we're gonna talk about it tomorrow at a managers meeting. My goal is, one of the meetings in May, we'll come back with after, some of this involves finance, some of it involves HR, we've gotta fit all of this new work in with the work that's already happening, so.
So you're gonna give us a map?
I'll give you a
For our
roadmap.
now buckets?
Yeah, that'll be coming. Farmers Market reached out to us, and I found a path that they're calling it a sponsorship. We really can't do a sponsorship, but we become a member. And they're looking for anywhere from $100 to $5,000. I've got $100 in my budget. There's some levels at 250 and 500. If you guys want to kick some money in and have Port Orchard have a little bigger, commitment to the farmer's market. If you aren't interested, I'll just stick to the $100 level that I was going to do out of my budget. So.
And the reason for that is that we're putting up booths down there to communicate to the public, so they're
Probably
hosting an
once a
event
month,
and
we're
drawing
gonna have a
people
booth
to
down
our booth, and it helps with our outreach.
Yeah, if we're gonna be a sponsor, I think it should be more than $100.
Yeah, I
I
agree,
agree.
that's a bad look for the city.
But it's not a sponsorship.
Well, whatever, we could do some LTAP dollars, or,
What can they afford? I'll kick in $100 out of my budget, but,
Only 100?
So,
Why did you manage the
We've got
council?
$49 in
well,
our.
there's 7 of you, you got a bit, much bigger.
budget, so, because there wasn't a whole lot of training, dollars spent last budget, so you have extra money for this budget to use for that if you would like. So I would encourage you.
What are
to-
those dollars look like?
What do you think is, what's been standard
No more than
previous?
500.
No more than 500.
No more than five? Oh.
Okay, and I'll kick in 100 of it.
Still 5.
Yeah, I think so.
Do we,
Okay, I'll talk to finance and make sure they're comfortable from an.
What, you think it higher or like?
oh, well, I was, but I didn't. I also don't know what our budget
No,
looks
she,
like.
no, she just said that no more than 5.
Okay.
That gives us still training.
Does that mean we have
Yes.
10,000 left, and she doesn't want us to spend 5,000?
No, we're going on track.
I'll talk to finance tomorrow
Council track.
and figure out a way to make that happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, the
Can we
farmer's market was
Future,
awesome.
talk to them about possibly doing that through LTAC?
Wouldn't be able to.
Because they bring in people, right?
But a farmer's market typically is local and lodging taxes designed to attract tourists.
People who are bringing that produce in are generally local.
Mentioned that.
Heads and
Heads and
beds.
So, all right, that's what I had for good of the order. Any other good of the order?
Oh, I just got a question.
Okay.
Then, so are we starting, the two citizens comment at is that gonna start on the 23rd?
No. Because
Okay, when does that start?
the attorney is part of the meeting tomorrow afternoon. She's got to amend our code, and there's a whole bunch of things that we were in. So it'll be bringing a package of changes to the code. So I got to find out, Charlie, when do you have capacity? Because I don't think things like the stormwater code that she's been working on and other things are more pressing than, making the modifications to our code. So I would hope that it's going to happen in the next couple months, I would say.
Okay, that long?
But you guys will have to vote on changes because the code has to be written and then it has to come before you guys and you guys vote on it. And then it goes into effect how long?
2 weeks after.
After publication.
But that will be part of our now bucket.
That's
Yeah, that was
in your
my
now
thought.
bucket, and we're having a meeting tomorrow afternoon. Okay, guys, here's the things that are in the now bucket.
Yeah.
This one's yours, this one's yours, this one's yours, what's your capacity to get this done? Check.
I do like the Facebook posts, updates on the traffic impacts from projects.
The roundabout? Yeah.
And yeah, I like that. I think there's like 2 today or something like that.
Yep.
That was, very informative.
It's
So
the,
I like the updates.
we've historically been doing that stuff. But we try, as we get information, that was a state project, and fortunately, they shared that information with us. And
Okay.
so they're adding capacity in the Tremont exit. If you've driven that lately, you saw the extra lane they're putting in
On the off ramp.
on the off ramp.
That's where they're putting in the rocks.
They're putting it out on the
Yeah.
slip lane for right turns.
Right turn
Yes.
lane.
Westbound.
Yeah, because I'm that guy going left, and it's sometimes
You
hard.
know,
You can't always
just go
get
right
right.
and you go
You
around
go
the
right,
roundabout,
go
you
around
don't
the
have to run all
circle.
those guys.
Oh, they're gonna do all that.
No, you can go
You-
around the circle. We allow you to travel around that roundabout.
So the Cedric exit, what are they doing right there?
That's a piss.
So they're
I
building
see
the
what you're
road,
saying.
they're building the road.
Take a right, take the
Culvert
roundabout.
pipes there.
Yeah.
That was a passage
Yeah.
project. So.
You did half the road and then move you
Move
over.
it,
and do
but
the-
at some point, it affects the off and on
On the
ramps.
wrong
The
direction.
off ramp going eastbound and westbound, the on ramp, Blackjack Creek crosses under there too.
Hey,
So-
Olala did a nice job right there.
Yeah,
There's
and-
no issues.
Yeah. Well, and they did the one in Chico Creek.
Never
so-
an issue. I mean, I think they're doing a great
They
job.
did a great job.
Yeah, but Olala didn't have off and on ramps too, so I don't know what the
Yeah.
impacts are.
No, they're, I drive those every day for the most part, and they do a great job.
I know, 16 eastbound, head towards Tacoma has been backed up in the mornings around 7:50.
Geek Harbor-ish area?
No, right here.
Oh, right here. Yeah,
That
yeah,
Tremont overpass has been backed up heading east.
Just because of the construction there?
I assume that's from the construction, I'm not driving down there to find out, but
Well,
I assume that's
we
what it
expect
is.
you to. We
Well,
want
I'll
to
check it
report.
out
Sorry.
tomorrow.
For the good of the order, we need to
I'll
do
email
that.
away.
Okay, all right. But thank you. We do try to get information out as we get.
Do we have, sorry, is it in the same line? I'm staying in the same line.
Transportation.
Communication of transportation. Do we have anything codified on notification to those who may be impacted on
Yes.
something that's happening with they're gonna be out flagging today because it's gonna be down to one lane?
I don't think we have any code for this.
When you permit it, you might, there
Yeah.
might, I mean, at the time of permitting, yes. When the construction's about to start, it's just our Facebook and our outreach to say, hey, this project is starting, but we don't send mailers or anything.
So we don't let somebody know, hey, FYI, you may want to tell your customers come from a different direction because
Sometimes there's
X,
not
Y, Z
time,
is
there's
going on.
not notice.
You know, a one-day project, I don't know. I mean, there's flagging laws, you don't have to put flags up every 15 minutes.
I'm just curious, I don't know, I'm
We
new
do
to
our
this
best to
stuff.
communicate.
Yeah, I know that, but I
And
just,
many times though, there's emergency repairs that happen.
Correct.
Water line breaks,
Something's gonna happen.
Sewer's bubbling out of the ground, we're gonna go shut the road down and go deal with it.
We have a Volkswagen-sized hole down on Bay Street, around by Annapolis, a couple years ago, where
Yeah.
that sinkhole came
Oh,
out.
Yeah.
The pottery work that's gonna be done here real soon. Sydney, sorry. In front of,
Pottery Sydney, right
Middle
there,
school.
yeah.
The middle school, yeah, I mean,
yeah, we've had reader boards up there for a weekend, and doesn't even start till next week. you know?
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff I'm asking, like, that's good staying ahead of that, but, I'm more,
Oh,
just, even going to Rotary this morning, they were out and I was curious, and then I know there was email later. That's a whole nother thing,
Not
but,
that many people have signed up for the email list.
We capture more people on Facebook.
question, in McCormick, I noticed that they have the radar things on the
Thank you.
speed
Forgot
signs.
about that.
Yeah, and
And they're dark right now.
they're dark right now, yep.
And there's a reason why.
Those are new ones?
Those are our new ones, and so they're in stealth mode right now. And so those are gonna be there, we're gonna put them in locations 2 or 3 weeks. I believe excluding the stealth mode. The stealth mode is, the first week we install them, they're dark and they're capturing data, okay? So we know what the speeds are without the signs
So
on.
that's what's going on right now.
Okay, now next week,
I
we're
like
we're
this.
gonna turn them on, and we're gonna be able to measure our, how much
effectiveness.
effect the signs
Nice
have.
work, Mayor.
Are people slowing down or not?
So those are not permanent, not that, they're not staying
Those are
there.
mobile signs, and we've got, those are the first pair of them we have, and the first of this type that capture data. And so, our plan is to move them every 2 or 3 weeks. We've gotta install, receivers for them with some concrete, and that's so they'll be back in that location at some point, because those foundations are in there likely permanently.
Sure.
And then we're gonna pick another place where we're getting complaints.
St. Andrews.
Or
St. Andrews.
We have a lot of
Right,
complaints,
I
and
agree.
so we're gonna move them around, and the first week they go up, they're in stealth mode.
Yeah. Well, that one's right by my house and terrific, like, yeah.
There's a license plate reader around there too, so
Are
they're
they
watching.
transferring that data? Are they transferring the data, or are they just collecting it there, and then it has to be
I
manual?
think it's,
They were designed to transfer.
somehow we're
40,
counting that.
I say the average is
I don't know.
15 over.
I remember for sure.
When you're concerned, you look at accurate data if the sign was on at the same time.
Yeah, so that was the purpose of this.
So
was
there's
stealth mode.
2 weeks of stealth mode or 1 week of stealth
A
mode?
week of stealth mode, and then
Okay.
2 or 3 weeks of having it up and running,
Yeah.
and then we're gonna move it to another place that
That's
goes
a
for a
really
week.
good idea.
Yeah,
A week.
that's a good
That's
idea.
so smart.
And actually, you'll probably see in the next mayor's budget, a few more of these signs.
Oh,
Yeah.
they work.
The technology,
People
they
see that
used to be
like-
really, really expensive,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they also used to, and the other style that we have, require an L&I permit because there's a ground wire. Okay, so then we were having to pay the county and pay for an L&I inspection. It's not the end of the earth, it's just process. These are designed without a ground wire, and our crews can pull the pin, throw them in the back of the truck carefully, and move them wherever and not have to get additional permits or contract with somebody else to do the work.
Yeah, I'm a fan. So.
These are some of the things you see at the AWC conferences.
Yeah.
We saw those 2
Yep.
years ago, I think.
Yep.
And then saw them again last year in Spokane.
So they come back and,
So they're affordable
yeah, they were
Surprisingly so.
10 grand-ish.
for a
Yeah.
pair,
For a pair of I
for a
believe.
pair.
But that's all the software, batteries, everything, so.
It
surprisingly
doesn't,
so.
I'll admit, it doesn't take long to figure out that the white flashing lights are just that.
Yeah, we can't really take pictures and
Yeah.
send tickets.
People think that they might be.
So, so when you're speeding, it's gonna flash at you to get your attention and give you the impression that we took a picture.
There's one on the way to Crystal
It's a
Lake.
smile you're looking.
People just blow by.
That's awesome.
Well, it's been there
Kids
too
going
long. Yeah,
home
they
just
would do
scared
that.
crap.
And then we'll have data to say,
Yeah.
okay, we put these signs in. What we
I hate to
learned from our other signs, they seem to be effective for a couple of weeks, and then they become,
Yeah.
part of the scenery, and they don't pay attention to them. So that's why we gotta move them around for them to be